Welcome to Rethinking Youth Ministry, where each week we hope to raise the bar for youth ministry by asking questions, interviewing thinkers, and having real, honest conversations about what it looks like to lead the next generation. I'm CJ, and this week I'm joined by Crystal Chang.
Hi.
Tom Chef-Shunas.
Hey, everybody.
Also known as Chef, and Ashley Bohintz.
Hey.
And today on Rethinking Youth Ministry, we're going to discuss the question, what does it mean to get better? And this is a question that we're all wrestling with all the time. We've heard other youth workers wrestling with it. What does it mean to get better? How do I get better? It just feels so vague. So let me just go ahead and ask you guys, what does it mean to get better?
Well, are we talking about getting better professionally or getting better personally? Because I think in youth ministry, sometimes my professional better just looks like more fun to the people on the outside and it's more work.
Well, yeah, that's the question. So what does it look like to get better, and how does it work personally, professionally? Are those things related? Are they disconnected? And which one are we focusing on today?
It's a good question. I don't know. Does getting better personally make you better professionally, or can you be great?
Right?
Or can you be great professionally and not be getting better personally?
See, it's so vague. It feels it feels so squishy.
I feel like if you're getting better personally, you'll get better professionally, even if people don't notice how you're getting better professionally. But I think you can be getting better professionally and not personally. Maybe not for long, but...
Yeah, no, I think that's true, that you can have... I mean, we see it all the time, right? I mean, the image you're portraying is amazing, looks like it's growing. Professionally, you would say that's getting better, and then there's a crash.
You're a hot mess inside.
Yeah.
Because you're a hot mess inside. And so we want to be youth workers that are long-termers. We want to be youth workers who are getting better personally and professionally. So I don't know which comes first. I think I know which comes first.
I mean, foundationally, it would be us personally getting better, right? Because that's... in the long run, what matters most anyways.
But I think you made a great point, Ash, that you can fake it professionally for a long time.
You can.
Yeah.
I was a professionally growing early teacher in the early years, and I loved it when people said, how do you do all those things? And I was burning out on the back end where no one was able to see that I was burning out behind closed doors.
Right. I've had folks that worked for me for years, and they're just amazing at getting stuff done. And then they met this amazing guy, and they got married, and all of a sudden, whatever was going on in their heart, because of this amazing guy who helped lead them to some personal health things, they got super healthy, and they got really they were not good at work anymore. And I realized this person's working 90 hours a week to go after something in their heart, and then they found health, whether it was it's not from the marriage, but it was just that relationship with a really healthy person brought them better personally, and then the professional they weren't finding their significance in their professional work anymore, which I thought was a good thing in the long run.
So which one are we diving into today? Because they are related. There's something going on there, and it seems like we're heading in the direction. Ashley, you look like you want to say something.
Well, I don't remember who said it, John Maxwell or Andy or Bill, but the most...
some sort of trinity.
Somebody really wise once said, the most important person you lead is yourself.
Wow.
So why don't we start there?
Yeah, I think it was Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
I think
Michael
that was
Jordan
Michael Jordan quote.
I love Michael Jordan.
Let's go with
categorize
Jordan.
him with those people.
LeBron James, I don't know who.
That's fine.
So could you say that one more time for us?
The most important person you lead is yourself.
So if the most important person you lead is yourself, then it sounds like that's going to be the foundation for what happens in your ministry, leading small group leaders, leading, other youth workers in your church or whatever. So if we're going to dive into something today, so we can get into what does it look like to get better professionally in another podcast episode, but let's today dive into what does it look like to get better personally. So Crystal?
Sure. And I think the personal and professional, like we said, are super connected. I remember in the early years of starting high school camp here at Orange, the very first year, we decided as a team we just had to sprint for a lot of reasons. We were a team of 4 people creating a camp for 2,000 kids. Sprinting was our only option. But in the second year, Ben Crawshaw was leading us, and he said the goal I want you to aim for is not attendance, it's not ticket sales, it's not programming. The goal I want you to aim for is longevity, because the best thing that could happen to this camp is if you're still around 4 years from now.
That's great.
And I think that's true for our ministries too. The best thing that could happen for your students is if they don't have to go through a student pastor change in 2 or 3 or 5 years. So maybe leading ourselves is about being better professionally, but it sure starts personally.
Yeah, Crystal, I know you've said this before, but I think you've said like the average youth worker is in his or her position for like 3 years and then they're gone. And so something's going on there. And I think that sometimes a lot of that does start personally. And if we're not working to get ourselves better, then we fall off a cliff later on.
Right.
Well, and a lot of it's because we live in this culture that just glorifies burnout. And we just live in a culture that if you say I'm busy, it makes it sound like you're a better professional. If you say I'm tired, it makes you sound like a better professional. And that's not always true. And then the opposite of that is we strive for balance. And one of our coworkers, Frank Beeler, just released a book called The Myth of Balance, where he talks about balance may not even really be possible.
Yeah.
So that's what
True.
we're all aiming for. And it may not even be a real thing.
I think that's good. But in the midst of all that craziness, you have to work on something. For me, the hardest part was what? Like, what do I work on? I know I have plenty of things to work on. Right. And I think for us, sometimes we tend to lean into the things we know we're not good at. And sometimes that's a good idea and sometimes it's not. For instance, I don't know if anybody's read Now Discover Your Strengths. Is that, I can't remember, Buckingham maybe? I think it's Marcus Buckingham.
Is the Strength Finder guy?
Yeah, the Strengths Finder stuff. So discover your strengths. And, so I had a student of one of our colleagues here who just told me, math's not one of my strengths. And I was like, well, that is true. I can assure you that. But I want you to get at least a C+. Like there's a minimum competency in some things. And we all have minimum competencies in skill sets in our lives. Like you have to have some quiet time, whether you're social or not. You have to have some social time, whether you're, a loner or not. Like there's a minimum competency thing. And then really lean into where follow the energy. Where does my heart come alive and that's something you want to get better at. That's something you want to pursue. I don't know if that makes any sense, but for me, I would always, when I was younger, lean into those things. I need to be a better this, or I need to do better at this one thing. Well, that's not necessarily the way I'm wired.
You may never be good at that.
Yeah. I mean, and I could spend all of my energy being good at that while missing the thing that's truly going to feed me over here.
So it's leaning into your strengths and making yourself better in those areas rather than trying to make your weaknesses better.
I think so. I'm getting a little confused because, again, like we were talking about, it's hard not to start talking about strengths professionally, but you do have strengths and weaknesses personally. Like, how do you connect? I mean, there's the spiritual pathways test from years and years ago. And, for me to really worship, like I'm not a musical worship. So that's... And I've felt guilty about that for a long time. Like, people around me are, into it, and that just doesn't connect. But when I'm engaged in ministry, my heart comes alive. And so, as much as that's work, as much as that, there's something about that I needed to pay attention to grow personally.
I don't remember who told me this, but it was such a good piece of advice. They said, lean into your strengths and don't minimize your weaknesses, automate your weaknesses. So use your phone to set up reminders to schedule you to deal with your weaknesses, or set up, like for me, I'm a weaknesses organization. I'm not the most organized person you'll ever meet. So every payment in my life is automated because I just won't do it otherwise. Yeah. And calendar appointments are all set up with reminders. So I work to just automate the things I'm not good at.
Or hire to your weakness.
Or hire to your weakness, yeah.
So go ahead,
I have
Jeff.
a friend of mine who asked a question. If you could have a robot that did anything for you, what would it be? That'll give you an answer of something you need to do, but you're not great at. Is there a way to automate it? Because we're surrounded by robots, right? Like you said, your phone can remind you to do something or do it for you.
Go ahead, Crystal. Were you about to say something?
I was just so excited because I told Siri yesterday, I didn't know Siri could do this, to set up a meeting with someone, and she did it. She set the calendar appointment and invited the person. I just didn't know that's a thing that could happen.
That's incredible.
I got really excited
I'm
about
going to try
it.
that.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, we're asking the question, what does it mean to get better? And Chef, you said, hey, maybe first we need to ask, what do I need to work on? Is that kind of the direction you were going, or did I mishear that?
I think so. I mean, I guess my point there was when I was younger, I started to lean into the things I was terrible at. And maybe those were things that if they're at a minimum competency or I can use technology to automate that, I should let that go and really lean into, something. One thing I've learned recently is I'm really creative. I never, because it's always systems and, for me, but it's creative systems and it's ideas that are constantly going in my head. And what I realized is if I don't have a system myself to get them out of my head, I get so cloudy I can't think straight. And so now when I get to that point, I've just learned to stop and I carry a notebook with me and I just write everything that comes to mind. Just whatever. It could be,
Love that.
I need to make sure I pick Joe up from swim team tonight. I need to, whatever it is that's swimming in my mind that's clouding my thoughts in the moment, I just get them out on a piece of paper where I know I'm going to look at them later. And that has helped me. Again, I think we're all over the place, but I think this is getting better,
I think I remember when I first started as a teacher and in ministry, a lot of the tensions I felt, and maybe you as a listener feel this way, and I've been guilty of saying these things to people or even believing them myself, but things like, I don't have anyone pouring into me to help me grow, or I don't know how I'm being evaluated, or I don't know who I'm supposed to be looking at. And I think what I realize now, a few years later, after kind of trying to figure those things out, is that your growth and your confidence is your responsibility. And like, I was looking so often to other people and other things to help me grow rather than taking the responsibility on myself to grow.
That's a really good point.
I think that's a great point. And I think the flip side of that is true. As an early young teacher, I didn't want anybody else speaking into my growth because I really wanted them to think I had it all together. So part of my taking responsibility for my own growth was saying to somebody, I don't have this all figured out and I'm going to need some help. I'm going to need a mentor. I actually just finished a book called The Power of Other by Dr. Henry Cloud. And one of the things he talks about is there are 4 kinds of relationships. There's the relationship with yourself. There's an unhealthy, harmful relationship. There's one that's flattery. And then there's the fourth. And the fourth is a relationship that's healthy, encouraging, and challenging.
Right.
And really, I mean, what he's talking about is a coach or a mentor. Everybody needs that person in their life who's going to push them.
Yeah.
And that was something I had to fight for early on because I didn't want to ask for it.
That's about you. Like their job is to make you better. So I think, if you pay for it or if you just have a mentor and you go ask directly for it. I know I went to my friend Lane years ago and I said, Lane, I told my wife yesterday, if something happens to me, I want Lane to do my funeral. And then this thing hit me. It was like, why would I wait till I'm dead to see what Lane has to say about,
Right?
all of that? And so I went to him and I said, Lane, hey, I love the relationship you have with your kids. I love the relationship you have with your wife. You're 10 years ahead of me. Would you mind just speaking into my life and answering some questions? And Lane being Lane's like, no, but I'll be your friend. But he really
that's
is.
What I meant. I mean,
but he really is that. And then there's also the people you pay, like whether it be a counselor. For me, I'm terrible with money. I need a financial advisor who speaks into my life. So, and then I have a leadership coach right now that I just need because I'm in transition. I need somebody who I can go to and, run some stuff by.
And I think what you're saying is it's a team of people. It's not a person or a mentor. I heard someone describe it as having a board of directors for your life, that every organization has a board of directors that helps them make decisions.
Right.
But then the organization I'm running, which is my own life,
Right.
I hesitate to have a board of people that I run decisions through. Yeah. And so that's actually something I've been talking about, even with the teenagers that I lead, is having a group of people that you run big decisions through.
Right.
And a few of them need to have some veto power.
My friend Joel Thomas, the lead pastor out at Mission Church in Arizona, he asks people to be on his personal board. He uses those words.
Does he really?
And the one I had a conversation with him one time, and he's like, "You'd be surprised at how honored people are." So they come to the meeting prepared to talk about him. But I think what we're saying here is, we don't know where to start. Look to the outside, find trusted, wise people to speak into it, whether it's an official request to be on the board or paying a counselor or whatever it is.
So we're saying, just kind of reflect that just a little bit more. So we're asking the question, what does it mean to get better? And what I'm hearing is, well, that's a hard question to answer, but a great place to start is because what we're really asking is, what does it mean for me to get better?
Right.
And we're saying, hey, surround yourself with a board of people or surround yourself with a personal board or a team or a counselor or whatever, and they'll help you start to figure out what it means for you to get better.
Yeah, I recently sat down with Mark Ostrecker, and he's been in middle school ministry or student ministry for over 40 years. And I was getting coffee with him, and I asked him, hey, I am 13 years in. What would you tell me? If you could talk to yourself again 13 years in, what would you spend your time doing? What would you not spend your time doing? And the thing that he said to me was, doors might open, opportunities might come, but the most important thing you can do is just get to know yourself more. Know what your weaknesses are, know what your cycles are, and spend all your time and energy knowing who you are, because the years ahead of you will be shaped by how well you know yourself.
Wow.
One of the things that drove me crazy when I actually first came to work here is the number of personality tests I felt like we had to take.
I love tests.
I was like, why am I taking all of these tests? But it's been so helpful getting to know myself better and getting to know the team better. I can't tell you how many times I've pulled out those results that I made fun of early on.
So which tests are you referring to, Crystal? Because there are a lot out there.
My
The divergent
goodness.
test.
Yeah,
Right.
I did make Chef take that. Like, are you dauntless? Divergent.
Yeah.
My.
I don't think that's
Actually,
it.
the whole van of middle school pastors took it.
Yeah. I'm
Divergent.
dauntless.
we all knew that.
Well,
He is dauntless.
I am. I don't look as good as 4, but he's
True.
not dauntless.
Okay, around the
divergent.
table real quick. If you were in a faction, what would it be?
I'm divergent.
Oh, well.
No, you're
You
not.
cannot put me inside
You
lines.
can't put me in a box.
You cannot put me in a box.
That's why my wife hates these tests. She's like, I don't want to be put in a box. And she always gets, my wife is, she's an adapter. So she says, I'm nothing. I'm like, no, you're everything. Like,
Aw.
it's such a cool, and she's everything to me. But,
That's cute.
but she doesn't like it because it defines you. And sometimes it's scary because you're like, I don't want to be that. I thought I was going to be that. I want to be dauntless, or I want to be, so.
That's
Just
such
a
a
thought.
good point. One of the things I've learned that I think is a weird quirk about our team that I love is everyone on our team exhibits like this bidominance between the two cerebral hemispheres. Most people are left-brained or right-brained. Almost everyone on our team runs right down the middle.
Yep.
And I think that's just a really fun thing because we can play to both sides. And even when I was in education, I appeared as super creative and super sort of right-brained. And then I jump into an environment with a bunch of creatives and I become the most left-brained person in the room.
Somebody's got to be.
So
Somebody needs a calendar around here.
So what are those tests? How do those tests equip you to get better? How do they help you in that way? Is it just an awareness of where you currently are?
I think it is. I think it's another perspective.
Yeah.
And that's what you're going after with other people. That's what
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
going
yeah.
after with tests. That's why you're reading some things that maybe you disagree with. I mean, one thing I've started to pay attention to is what annoys me because or if I'm on a team and I just don't get along with somebody, you have to pay attention to what it's annoyance, it frustrates you, whatever it is, because you probably have a value you don't even know you have that someone's crossed. And the only way you find it is like, oh, what is that about that? What is it about that that's important to me that I didn't even know was important to me? And to Mark Ostreicher's point to you, that's a level of getting to know
Totally.
yourself a little bit more, which just equips you for what's coming in the future.
And those tests help you identify your natural wirings and your natural reaction, which doesn't mean it's a good thing. It could be a really bad thing, but knowing what they are so that you learn the skills to overcome that natural wiring or that natural tendency.
Right. And wiring is not a good or bad thing. It's an is.
Right.
It's an
Right.
is.
It's how you, once you understand yourself, then you understand, okay, because of my wiring, I have to be cautious here or I have to lean in to that here.
Right.
So it's almost like we ask the very, very general question, what does it mean to get better? But hey, a better question might be like, almost like, okay, let's figure out who you are and take this area. And what does it mean to get better in this specific or this specific, I don't know what you call those things, character traits, whatever areas, in a personality test. It's almost you got to drill down to that level first, because otherwise you do just live in this very vague clouds. Well, am I getting better here? Am I getting better here? And it's super difficult to nail something down and take a step.
Yeah, I mean, the sooner you can know what you're good at and what you're not, that's when your plan of how to get better starts.
I think that's good. And different ways of figuring out what you're good at or what you value are different. You know, another approach I have is I read a lot. I'm in traffic a lot, so I use Audible. So when I say I read a book, often I have to listen to a book. So I'll just admit that. But so I try to read a book about God that will make me better, something, you know, inspirational. I try to read a book just for fun, you know, fiction or something like that. And then I always read a book that every third book about is a book that scares me, whether it's written by a non-Christian or it's written against Christianity or it's a spirituality I don't understand. And every time I read it, I always see the fingerprints of God in it, that they're, you know, they're using the truth I know from Scripture and they're applying it in another way. And it just enforces the things I believe about myself, the things I believe about Scripture and everything else. But the fact that I'm being challenged by an idea is what brought the clarity. Like I never would have thought that, you know, because I never would
Love
go,
that.
I don't know, it's an idea. But so far, so good, you know.
You said
it's
you
been
read
helpful.
a book that inspires you, a book that's fun,
Yeah.
and then a book that scares you.
Yeah.
How often do you rotate through those
That's
three?
it.
Like
Those three.
Those
So,
three?
Yeah.
Like one a month?
I read about 3 books a day. No, I don't. I read, I mean, depending on my driving, I
Yeah,
could
yeah.
read, you know, 1 or 2 a week. I'm usually probably 4 a month.
I just-
you know,
yeah,
some are
just
faster
simply
than
curious.
others. And I always have what I'm reading as well, just because, and that's usually one I really enjoyed listening to. And I'm like, I put that in the, like, I'm going to chew on that one for a while, you know, and I don't get on myself about how fast I'm reading it. So, you know, but I love content and I've got to be careful because I'll just sit in the inspirational world
Right.
a while. And I don't think that's good for you. I think you just got to let your brain, you know, have
So
fun.
let me ask you, you've been in leadership for a long time. So, and since you
I'm
kind
an
of
old man.
went into
Yeah,
that,
that's a nice way of
Sorry.
saying he's
Yeah.
the old man at the
That's
table.
right.
since we're kind of going down this path a little bit, and we're talking about how do you get better? Are you just going on? I mean, I'm just getting practical. Are you just going on Audible and like, oh, that seems interesting, or do you have a method for, you know what, I am going to try to grow in this area. I'm going to try to get better in this area, so I'm going to go search out a resource to help me.
Yeah. I use the library on that. So you get these emails with what's hot and what's selling right now. So I grab it and I put it into a wish list, I guess it's
Yeah.
called a wish list. And then I kind of follow the energy, like what am I interested in right now?
Yeah.
And I jump into that. So there's probably 5 or 6 fictional books. I usually like a war story or something like that. Then there's the things I'm scared of, or the things that challenge me. Those books are everywhere. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, I don't know if you know this, but it seems to me that atheists work harder on their faith than most Christians do. So
For sure.
their lack of faith.
Yeah.
I mean, they work hard to maintain a lack of faith. And I mean, it's one of my favorite questions to ask them. I have a couple of neighbors that we talk all the time about this sort of thing. And I'm like, you guys work way harder at this. Like,
Right.
does that mean anything to you? So that's a whole separate thing. But there's books like crazy on it. I mean, Richard
And if he
Dawkins.
really likes a book, he'll show up and the whole team has a copy.
I do
That's
that.
happened multiple times.
Right. Well, I mean, even I think the last one I did that I loved was not Dysfunctions of Team, that
The
Ideal
Team
Team
Player.
Player. Yeah, Patrick Lencioni and Ideal Team Player. If you haven't read it, it's a really great one. It's also a great one to use to read through the lens of recruiting volunteers. How do I recruit the best volunteers? It gives you that humble, hungry, and smart angle. So it just connected. So I brought it to the team and great conversations.
Yeah.
So
Gosh,
go ahead,
I
Crystal.
love this idea of inviting viewpoints that you disagree with, because I think our tendency when we want to get better is to read people listen to podcasts that will tell us we're already doing a great job.
That is so
Things
true.
Or
that
that's who
feel
you
good.
invite to speak into your life as
Oh,
well.
for sure.
Well, that person's just going to keep hounding me about this thing. Well,
One
maybe
of-
you need hounded about that thing, you know?
Maybe one of the things that we all leverage around this table is our commute time, because we live in Atlanta and our commute
Right.
times are just so long. So the team teases me sometimes. I'm a glutton for punishment, because I will listen to a conservative podcast and a liberal podcast back to back. Or I'll listen to, we have
So
the
smart.
nation's largest conservative talk radio station here in Atlanta. And then I'll flip over to a much more liberal station, because I think it's just healthy to have both viewpoints in your head and to have some sort of understanding of what every side thinks.
So Ashley, we just talked about, you know, some of the ways that Chef kind of personally, you know, tries to make himself better and, you know, that kind of a thing. and you two, Crystal, Ashley, you both lead teams. And going back to the quote that you mentioned earlier, the most important person you lead is yourself.
Yeah.
So do you guys have any ways that you intentionally try to make yourself better in that sort of a way?
One of the things I do, I call it Fairy Tale Friday, and it's a way that I refill myself, but also a way I try to make myself better. And on Fridays, I try to do something new, go somewhere new, try something new, or learn about something new, because the way I best learn is through experience. I love to read. I love to listen to podcasts. So I'll make goals for myself about that. But if I can have an experience with something, it will help change me.
Yeah, that's great.
So Ashley's fueled by new things. As a very loud introvert, I have learned that I'm refueled by time alone. But that's not always obvious to the people around me that I need it. And so I've been working over the last year of making sure that when we travel for work, I'm intentionally taking some time away. When we're at camp, I'm intentionally taking some time away. Even when I'm at student camp leading a group of students, and I tell them this, you're going to hang out with your co-leader for a while. I'm going to go back to the condo.
I need a nap.
For about 3 hours. I will be back and worthwhile after that. But I think every leader needs to figure out what are the points where I need rest and be intentional about it. And that's as much a discipline as anything else.
We'll go back to a point we made in another episode. Protect the asset of this idea, and your asset, the biggest asset you have, is the strength of your mind and the strength of your heart, the strength of your faith. That's the thing that's going to overflow into the people you're trying to minister to. So that's sleep, that's exercise, that's, ideas and being challenged. And so I don't even know that it's a good question. I know we keep coming back to this idea of how do I ask the question a better way?
Yeah.
Chef's favorite phrase is bad question.
He loves it.
I just think we really need to step back and think of it from every paradigm. And in this one, it's sometimes you don't know you got better until a year and a half later, and this thing you read pops out in a moment, and you're like, oh my gosh, and you're surprised by it. And so it's not, how do I know I'm getting better, as much as, take an audit of your calendar. Are there the right people on it? Are there the times on it? And if you can say yes to all those things,
I think that's great.
check.
Yeah.
So
something you said in the beginning, Chef, you said, how do you even know where you start as you're, doing this? And I'm also a soccer coach for middle and high school girls. And one of the things I used to always say to them is championship teams aren't 100% better than every other team. They're 1% better in 100 different ways.
Such a great quote.
And I always ask myself, what's the 1% in this? You don't have to be, 1 point lies between first and second place, right? And not that it's always a competition, but in my world, maybe it is. But little bit about myself.
Ashley's life is just competing with everybody else.
Speaking of
I compete with
places she
myself.
needs to get better.
Every time I speak, I give myself an A minus,
Right.
B. I go all the way through the grades, which is very funny. I grade myself, but I do. And I think that it's, instead of thinking of the overwhelming how many different areas you need to grow in, is each time you have an encounter with someone, what's one little improvement you can make? Because that's how you're going to get better.
I'm working with this journal right now. It's helping me think through my days. So in the morning, I write my schedule and think about 3 things I want to get done during the day. And it's just a way. I was like, I don't know if that'll work. Let me try it.
Sure.
But the most helpful thing it does is at night, it asks the question, what did you learn today? And for me, just the act of writing it down and putting it into words, these solid ideas come up, whether it's about a person or a big idea. It's been really helpful to me. So it's a new habit that I'm, before I go to bed. What did I learn today?
That's awesome.
All right, guys, I know we could talk about this forever. And what does it mean to get better? There's a lot inside of that question. We've talked about everything from, hey, maybe you need to take a personality test to drill down and find out who you are first, so you know where to start to get better. We've talked about, all the unique ways we can individually get better. But before we, wrapped up this conversation, where would you suggest a youth worker start? What's your final takeaway for a youth worker who's like, all right, I'm ready to get better. All right, I'm going to go find out who I am. I'm going to drill down, maybe take a test, maybe get a group of, my own personal board of, advisors around me. I'm going to figure out that. Now what? Now what do I do from there?
I think I'd start, and this is simple, but I'd start in prayer. If we read the Psalms, we read scripture, search my heart. help me understand what it is I need to know. I trust you know more about me than I know about me, which is what we would love for our kids to actually treat God like he's God. Sometimes we need to treat God like he's God and go, what's next for me? And whether it's part of the body of Christ that shows up and mentions something to you that day, or it's a whisper in your heart that you just think you need to follow, even though you don't understand, I think you should. And so journaling what seems to be where the energy or that I'm excited about this thing, or those are all different ways you could hear from the Spirit. But search my heart and, just follow through on that. You never know what you're going to learn.
Good.
I think you make a great point that the Holy Spirit will always lead you toward better. Never going to lead you toward worse.
Right.
So spending time connected to him is huge. I think the other thing I would say is identify as you make plans to get better, also identify some enemies of better. And there are a lot of those.
Yeah.
For me, an enemy of better is comparison. I will aim to be a better version of Ashley or a better version of CJ or a better version of someone else in the room. When in reality, I'm being led to be a better version of myself.
It's really, I was thinking social media, but it's comparison.
Yeah. It's comparison.
Yeah, it's just a dangerous place to waste my time.
Right. Yeah.
And there's
sure.
some other enemies. I mean, there's laziness. That's an enemy. There's Netflix.
I was just thinking
which
Netflix.
inherently is not evil, but sometimes can take up so much time that I don't get better.
Yeah.
But just circling those sort of in the journal or on the calendar is a big deal.
Ashley, do you have a next step for that youth worker?
My first thought as we wrap this up is just as a youth worker, there's a lot of people who are pulling at you so that you can help make them better. And I think it just takes intentionality to be like, I'm the most important person, and make time for yourself on your calendar, block it out, and not feel guilty when something comes up.
That shouldn't be the first calendar appointment that you cancel when something comes up.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That's awesome.
Great point.
Yeah, and Ashley, what you've brought up, just to kind of close this out here early in the episode, is that the most important person you lead, it really is yourself, because everything you do inside of your ministry, it's just kind of a reflection of where you are personally and what's going on inside your heart. And with that, thank you for joining us for the Rethinking Youth Ministry podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, we would love for you to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and leave a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Your review will help us make this podcast better. And if you want to learn more about the student curriculum and strategy that we're all a part of here at Orange, visit rethinkingym.org. That's also where you'll find the show notes for this episode and some of the books that we referenced and personality tests that we referenced throughout this episode as well. All the links will be right there, rethinkingym.org for you. Until next time, I'm CJ.
I'm Crystal.
I'm Chef.
And I'm Ashley.
And thank you for listening